Hi everybody, and welcome to the Music Corner. I'm your host, Jonathan Q. With this program today, we're going to talk about Guitar Basics 101. For a lot of you, you're picking up the guitar for the first time, and today's show is a chance to go over some of the basics. Now, in talking to some of you who've been watching these programs, I'm aware that a lot of you have a lot of questions that are important for beginners to cover, to know about, a lot of fundamentals. What I'm going to do is give you my perspective on these fundamentals, give you some good tips based on my 20 years or more than 20 years of teaching a lot of different students, both adults and kids. Everything I show you today is good information, but I encourage you to follow up with your own private lessons with a teacher, and they can fine-tune some of the basics that I'm talking to you about today. So let's get started. Now, I'm going to assume a lot of you out there are right-handed. Those of you who are left-handed, everything I say, you can just reverse it in your mind. Although I have to say there are a lot of left-handed students who actually learn the guitar the same way a right-handed person would learn it, meaning the guitar is resting on your right leg, you're holding your guitar pick in your right hand, and you're fretting with your left hand. So if you're lefty, unfortunately you have a choice to make, whether you want to play like a righty, which is not the worst thing, or if you actually want to get a left-handed guitar, hold it the reverse way. Either way can work for a lefty. I encourage lefties to stick with their true lefty nature though, and to get a lefty guitar and to reverse everything that I'm going to say today during today's show. All right, let's get started. So I'm hoping that you have a guitar, or that you're shopping for a guitar, you're interested in playing guitar, otherwise you wouldn't be watching today. And the idea is, how do you begin? What are some good habits you can start with right away? A lot of students are worried about bad habits, so let's erase some of the bad habits right now. All right. Notice the guitar has a nice curve to it, right? Going to rest that curve right on your right leg. Feels comfortable. It's the most probably natural way of holding the guitar for a lot of us. Now, you also make sure you have good posture, okay? Although the fact is, for most people, especially when they start off, you're going to be craning your neck because you want to look to see what your left hand is doing. So you have to find that happy medium. You don't want to slouch, and yet you are going to want to lean over a little bit and see what your left hand is doing. That's pretty natural. As you get better at the guitar, you won't have to look quite so much at your left hand. A good goal in the long run is to be able to play without looking at the left hand at all. But that's not the most important thing to start off. So you've got your guitar, right? Got it resting on your leg right there. Now, hopefully you have a bunch of guitar picks around. Guitar picks come in all different shapes and sizes. Let's do a little close up on the right hand for a second here. Guitar picks come in all different shapes and sizes. The kind that I happen to like happens to be a relatively small guitar pick. Some people might even call it a mandolin pick. It's just my personal favorite. It's about 1 millimeter in diameter, a little bit on the thick side. But guitar picks are very, very personal preference. Probably the most common guitar pick is the Fender medium pick, nice brown tortoiseshell color. But here's what I'm really getting at. If you watch YouTube or watch TV, watch your friends play, you see people hold their picks all different ways. But most guitar teachers feel pretty strongly about the one really good way to hold the guitar pick. So let's focus on the right hand again for a second here. What I've got going is my thumb is extended. It's squeezing the pick against my curled up index finger. Take a look. See how my index finger looks like? All my fingers are sort of curled up like that, lightly curled up. My thumb is going across the top of the pick. It looks like that. So my thumb is doing all the real squeezing. And it's my index finger that's sort of acting as a wall or a barrier. And it's good to keep your other fingers lightly curled up. Rather not have this, rather have everything lightly curled up. It's a very efficient kind of look. Okay? So again, your thumb is doing all the work. It's holding the pick. Another important thing is the tip of your thumb should pretty much extend only as far as the tip of the pick. You know, every once in a while, a student by mistake will extend their thumb way past the edge of the pick, and that does no good at all. So, your thumb right about to the edge of the pick. See, I have a little room to bend my thumb knuckle right there. Yeah, that's good. Now, here's the most common wrong way to hold the pick, and it's very. A lot of people on instinct they hold the pick like this. See all that space right in here? That's a sure sign that you're not holding the pick the most efficient way, okay? So for our purposes, we do not want that, right? We want to curl up your pointer finger, your thumb does all the actual holding, and you end up with a very kind of a loose fist. Now, having said that, I've watched Eric Clapton a number of times, And every time I watch Eric Clapton, he's holding the pick the exact way I just told you not to hold the pick. All right, and he seems to have made a good little career for himself. But like I said, most guitar teachers will tell you that this is pretty much the most practical way to hold the pick. It gives you more speed, it gives you more sensitivity. Okay, so I would stick with this method, but keep your eyes open. You'll see a lot of friends and family members and rock stars and people on YouTube holding the pick all different ways. But stick with this way and it'll serve you well. Okay, so that's holding the pick. A couple things about holding the pick. First of all, light grip. In fact, if you drop the pick once in a while, at least that's proof that you're not squeezing it too tight. Being good at a musical instrument has a lot to do with economy of motion, using the absolute minimal amount of effort, not because you're lazy, but because you've identified just the specific muscles and the specific amount of tension and pressure, whether it's how hard to squeeze the pick or how hard to press down on the strings with your other hand. Over time, you develop a light touch, and I'm going to encourage you to keep developing a light touch, whether it's with your right hand or your left hand. It goes a long way to improving your ability, your speed, your sound, everything. So when you're holding the pick, in general, a pretty loose grip on that pick, you know, especially if you want a nice smooth sound, a nice light sound. There'll be some times when you give that pick a little more of a squeeze, and we'll talk about that when that time comes. But in general, a nice light grip on that pick. And if you drop it every once in a while, that's the worst things can happen, okay? But at least you can say, hey, I dropped it because I wasn't overdoing it, you know, and wasting that energy. That's why the best musicians make it look so easy when they play, because they're using less muscles than a beginner is using. They've fine-tuned their technique, so they're just doing the bare minimum amount necessary, you know, to get a great sound. Okay, so in terms of where to strum the guitar, in general, you want to strum the guitar over the sound hole. It gets a warm, rich sound. But an experienced guitar player will tell you there's plenty of times when you actually want to pick down here. You know, to get a twangy sort of sound. So it's not against the rules to pick your guitar down here. Maybe you want to get a very dramatic kind of sound that can only be achieved by strumming back here towards the bridge of the guitar. And by the same token, you can move your right hand further up the neck to get a thicker, warmer, sweeter kind of sound, which is great for jazzy chords. All right, but trust me, you can't go wrong strumming right above the sound hole. The less you think about it, the better, to tell you the truth. I've had some great students over the years who are so detail-oriented, and they have a lot of great questions. But a lot of times my answer is, don't worry about it too much. You know, there's some bigger things to worry about on the guitar, some bigger challenges, some things that are worthy of your attention. Exactly where you strum the guitar, don't worry about it too much. Right over the sound hole, you'll be fine, okay? All right, so that covers the right hand for right now. Let's talk about your left hand. So let's focus on the left hand for a minute. And again, if you happen to be a lefty guitar player playing a lefty guitar, this is going to be your right hand. All right. So your left hand on the guitar. I have a bunch of information for you over here. Those of you who are righties, this is the hand that has a challenging job. For lefties, it'd be your right hand. But when you're using your weaker hand to do a lot of complicated tasks, it's probably the #1 most frustrating thing, not just for beginning guitar players, but for a lot of guitar players. It seems like the guitar should almost be played with your dominant hand over here in this part and your weaker hand over here, but that's another story. All right, so let's talk about what you can do with your fretting hand to help you make progress, to help you get the best sound, and to help you be not quite so discouraged or quite so frustrated when it can't always do exactly what you want to as fast as you can get it to. So let's talk about the left hand for a second. Let's look over here at the left hand. First thing, you always want to use the very tips of your fingers. Can you see where those lines are in my fingertips right there? Okay? You always want to use the very tips of your fingers, pretty close to the fingernail. For the most part, you don't want to use the squishy pads of your fingers, right? You want to move right up there to the tips of your fingers for several reasons. There's a bone, you know, the end of your finger bone is right there, nice hard bone that helps you get the best sound of the guitar. It also helps you become pretty nimble. That fleshy part on the pad of your finger kind of can slow you down as you lift away and put it back on. It kind of can slow you down, you know, extra friction there. So as much as possible, whenever possible, unless there's a practical reason otherwise, stay in the very, very tips of those fingers, okay? One of the best things you can do for yourself. Okay, let's continue with the left hand. Here's some other tips for the left hand. To get the best tone, you want your finger to be as close to the fret as possible. See how close I am to that first fret? As I get further away from the fret, there's a very likely possibility the sound is going to be buzzy or dead. Hear that little sizzly, buzzy sound? No one wants that, right? The closer you are to the fret, the more likely you are to get the sound you want, that clear, ringing sound. Okay? Now, it's not always possible for a variety of reasons. You may not always be able to get that tip of your finger right behind the fret. But whenever it is possible, that's exactly where you want to be. And if you ever hear that dead or muffled or muted or buzzy sound, very often that's the reason. The left-hand finger just isn't close enough to the fret. Now, if you're playing something like, say, the A major chord, those of you who know the A major, grab your guitar, hold down the A major chord. Those of you who don't know the A major chord, it's okay, don't worry about it right now, but take a look at my left hand. When I hold down the A major chord, see how far away my index finger is from the second fret here? Now, physically, I can't get it any closer. Got a little traffic jam, right? That's all I can do. So that means that this index finger is just going to have to press harder, okay? Give it a good squeeze. That overcomes the fact that it's pretty far away from the fret, right? Ideally, the index finger would be right there. But most people, I've never met anyone who could get all three of those fingers to be right up close to the second fret when they're playing an A major chord. But that's just how it goes. So the solution is, over time, building up those muscles and squeezing hard. Okay, so let's stay in the left hand for a second here. We talked about playing with the very tips of your fingers, not the fleshy pads, but the very tips, up by the fingernails. We talked about, whenever possible, be right up close to the fret, okay, for the best sound. Now, here's another thing that everyone needs to be reminded of, or they need to point out to them. You want to make a habit of whatever note you're playing, especially if you're playing a note on the fatter strings. You're going to have to curl your hand around. See what I'm doing there? Curl your hand around. You want to have the image of a rainbow right here, okay? If you're just playing on a skinny string, okay, you can get away without curling your hand too much. But if you're playing on one of the other strings, I'm pushing my left wrist out and I'm reaching around. Now, this might not be comfortable at first, but in the beginning you may have to push your left wrist out away from you to establish that, what I call a rainbow curve right here. Now, the more you play the guitar, whether you're a child or an adult, the more you play the guitar, the more limber these fingers are going to get. And they're going to develop what I call a natural curve. But in the beginning, you may have to push your wrist out quite a bit to get that curve to happen, okay? And the advantage of doing this is when you play one note, your finger won't be leaning over onto another string and deadening that string, because you may want to actually be strumming both of those strings, and you don't want to deaden anything out. So it's a good habit to do that thing I call rainbow curves, okay? And we'll talk more about that. So far, tips of your fingers, rainbow curves. Here's another image I want you to have in your head. I'm going to go back to that A major chord I was just strumming. If you look closely in the palm of my hand, there'd be room for maybe a golf ball, a little grape or something, okay, right in here. I'm talking about right in here. It's a good image to have. Imagine you have a golf ball or a grape in the palm of your hand, and you either don't want to crush it or you can't crush it because it's a golf ball, right? That means you're getting a nice curve and there's some space in there. Here's the alternative, grabbing the guitar like a snow shovel or something. Now, that's not the worst thing in the world for an experienced guitar player, because their fingers are so nimble, they can grab it like this. See where my thumb is up here? You know, if you watch some musicians on TV or on YouTube, you'll see lots of times the thumb is hanging over there. For them, that's okay, but when you're just starting off, it's not a helpful thing and it can really be detrimental. The alternative for us is that image of a grape or a golf ball in the palm of your hand, curling around. So, quick recap. Tips of your fingers, rainbow curve, golf ball in the palm of your hand. All right? Now, that's not going to make your life instantly easy as a guitar player. In fact, it might even feel like a challenge. But in the long run, that gives you a good fundamental left hand position. Now, stay here with me on the left hand. See where my thumb is up here? Thumb is an important part of your overall grasp of the guitar neck. In my opinion, having taught a lot of students over a couple of decades here, where you put the thumb can be a pretty personal decision. There are two things to think about. Number one, if your thumb is in a place where it's giving you any sort of pain or discomfort, obviously that's not where you want your thumb to be. And number two, where can the thumb be to support what you're trying to accomplish with your left hand? All right? There's no one place your left hand thumb always has to be. Now you may find in general your left hand thumb is more or less on the curvy part of the guitar, right in the back. You know, probably not sticking up too high like that. Probably not aiming away from you like you're hitchhiking, you know. But keep those two things in mind as you begin your guitar career here, whether you're learning individual notes on the guitar or learning a chord, like I just played the A major chord. Where you put your thumb can really help you or can hold you back. In worst case scenario, could even cause you some pain or discomfort. So right there, those are some things to think about. Whatever you're trying to do on the guitar, think about where your thumb can help you. And definitely move it around. People sometimes need to be reminded, hey, your thumb is flexible, it's movable. You know, you can tell it to do whatever you want it to do. Secondly, if you do feel some discomfort with your thumb, time to change something. I'll give you a quick example. I had a student once, and finally we noticed he was doing something that was causing him some discomfort. Instead of having his thumb, you know, more or less extended like this, he was actually bending his thumb and grinding the tip of his thumb into the wood of the neck of the guitar while he was playing. You know, kind of like this. No good reason to do that. As soon as we noticed it, we adjusted it and got him to extend his thumb. Not many people, you know, have that habit, but it's worth thinking about. You know, in general, you want your thumb to be in a natural position. Okay, so far with the left hand in today's show, we're talking about Guitar Basics 101. We've talked about using the tips of your fingers, making that rainbow curve. We've talked about the image of a golf ball in the palm of your hand. And we've talked about how your thumb can really help you achieve things, could also hold you back, and it could almost even cause you a little bit of pain if you're not careful with it. So the last thing to wrap up my conversation about the thumb is whatever you're trying to do on the guitar, keep your eye on your thumb and ask yourself, can I shift my thumb in any direction that can help me achieve what I'm trying to achieve? Okay? Whatever you do, don't forget about your thumb and don't leave it in one place. You may change your thumb position constantly depending on what the song, what the exercise is asking you to do. Okay, I think you get the message here. So far we've talked about being comfortable resting the guitar on your leg there. We've talked about holding the pick by curling up your index finger, in fact curling up all your fingers and letting your thumb really do the holding. Okay, just like that. See how natural that looks? I've heard some guitar teachers describe that as a loose fist. That's a pretty good description. See how, if you look right here, see how there's a nice closed line right there? That's a good image. What you don't want is that kind of thing. You know, see how my pointer, see what's going on there? My pointer is sort of pointing in towards the guitar. I see a lot of pretty good guitar players hold the pick that way. And remember what I said at the beginning of the show, I've seen Eric Clapton holding his pick like that. It seems to work out okay for him, but most of us guitar teachers agree that loose fist, that nice line right in there. Don't squeeze the pick too tightly. There's a lot of time there's no need to squeeze it tightly. Okay, and we covered the left hand, the tips, the rainbow, the golf ball, being aware of where your thumb is, where it can be to improve you, and so on. Okay, so that gives you some ideas. Now let's talk about tuning the guitar. Fortunately, we live in a world today where there are digital electronic guitar tuners, which make our jobs really easy. And if you have one of those and you know how to use it, that's great. But it's also good to be able to tune the guitar within itself, what they call internal tuning. You might not have a tuner handy, or you might just want to challenge your ear to actually listen. You know, the thing about a guitar tuner, and I love them and I use it all the time, it doesn't challenge you to listen at all. And you know, a musician, frankly, is as much a listener as a physical player. You got to have good ears to be a good musician, you know, and we want your ear to get better and better and better. I think of my ear, my musical ear, as a muscle that gets better and better over time, hopefully. So what I'm going to show you right now, called internal tuning, is going to make you a better listener. It takes a little more time, for sure. It takes a little more patience, but it's nice to know that you can tune your instrument without an external device, if you have to do it, or if you just want to be able to feel like you've mastered your instrument. We all want that sense of mastery over an instrument. So let's talk about tuning the guitar to itself. It's very easy. Here we go. What I want you to think about is how, as you go higher and higher up a string, sooner or later, the note you play is going to be the same sound as the neighboring skinny string gets without any fretting at all. Here's what I mean. When I'm on my fat E string, the 6th string, the fat E string, when I play that fat E string at the 5th fret, meaning my pointer finger is right behind the 5th fret. Let's look at the left hand for a second here. My pointer finger is right behind the 5th fret. Okay? That note happens to be the note A. Now the neighboring skinny string, this one right here, the 5th string, naturally is the note A. So those two notes should agree with each other, right? If your guitar is in tune, the fat string, also known as the E string, 5th fret, should sound the exact same as its neighboring skinny string. That's the A string right here, with no frets, meaning your left hand isn't squeezing it at all. Are you with me on that? Fat string, 5th fret, neighboring skinny string, 0 fret. And if your guitar's in tune, you're all set. Now that relationship works across the guitar, meaning with one exception, which we'll get to in a minute. Anytime you squeeze a string at the 5th fret, the neighboring skinny string should have the exact same sound with no fingering being pressed down at all, no fingers fretting at all. Okay, let's review that real quick, because I know we're getting a little mathematical for some people out there. When you squeeze a string at the 5th fret, meaning your finger right behind the 5th fret, that gets a sound into your ear, and you should hear that exact same sound on the neighboring skinny string without your left hand doing anything. You compare those two sounds. If they don't agree with you, with each other, one of those strings is going to have to go a little bit tighter, a little bit looser. And we'll get to that in a minute. Okay? Now, the 5th fret, therefore, I call it kind of a magic number, that magic number 5, because the 5th fret is what you can use as a reference to getting your guitar in tune. So starting right now, I want you to sort of give extra respect and extra attention to the 5th fret of your guitar, because it's there to help you. Okay? I'm going to give you another illustration. This time I'm going to use the 2 skinny strings, okay? Also known as this, the 1st string E and the 2nd skinny string B. Okay, watch what I'm going to do here. Left hand. I'm going to do left hand, 2nd skinny string, the B string at the 5th fret. See that right there? That's a 2nd skinny string, 5th fret. Now if my guitar is in tune, my skinny string, open, skinny E, should have the exact same pitch. So here's the first one. Again, that's my 2nd skinny string, 5th fret, and my 1st skinny string, 0 frets. Okay, same note either way. That's how I know those 2 strings are in tune. Now, a minute ago I mentioned there's an exception, because that's life. There's always one exception in life. This 5th fret relationship that we're talking about right now, there's one exception. Okay, now here's the exception. To compare your 3rd skinniest string, also known as the G string, to the 2nd skinny string, also known as B. Comparing the 3rd one with the 2nd one, the 5th fret is not your reference point. And I apologize, I don't know who invented this idea, but this is just how the guitar has evolved over the years. When you want to compare the 3rd skinniest string, that one right there, to the 2nd skinny string to make sure that they're in tune with each other, the reference point for our left hand here, the reference point, you ready? 4th fret. Now I wish I could tell you exactly why this happened. Let's look at the left hand for a second here. Okay, see where I am right there? The 3rd skinniest string, 4th fret. And I'm going to compare that note with my 2nd skinny string, no fingers. And if my guitar is in tune, if your guitar is in tune, those 2 notes should sound identical, which they do. Okay, so there's your one exception. Now I'm going to pause for a second here. I know as we go through this program and other programs, you're going to have some questions. The advantage of having a private instructor is you can ask that person that question in real time. But I'm going to do the next best thing. At the end of the show, you'll see a phone number and an email address. So feel free to send me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. I'd love to hear from you. You might even have some suggestions for a future show. I'd love to hear some suggestions for a future show. I'd love to have your feedback. So before we wrap up today's show, let me make sure that you know all the stuff that's going by kind of quickly that we're doing today. Don't worry, you can always send me a question and I'll answer as quickly as I can, and we'll complete your knowledge of Guitar Basics 101. All right, so we left off talking about tuning, talking about how the fifth fret on any string, with one exception, is a reference point. The fifth fret is sort of a magic part in the guitar. When you play a string on the fifth fret and you get a certain note, that note should agree exactly with the neighboring skinny string wide open. And the one exception is the third skinniest string. You press down on the fourth fret instead of the fifth fret. And you compare that third skinny string, fourth fret, with the second skinny string open. Okay? You can do it. Internal tuning. It's a way to make sure the guitar is in tune with itself. Now here's one more tip. Say you compare two strings and one of them clearly is not the same as the other. The question is, which is the one that you need to reach up and adjust, right? You might not be sure. So what you need to do is go through all 6 strings first. If you go through all 6 strings using this fifth fret method and the fourth fret for that one occasion, you'll get a pretty good sense for which strings are in tune and which one's not in tune. But if you only compare 2 strings out of context, just those 2 strings, there's no telling which is the one that's out of tune. Okay, so go through all 6 strings first, and that'll suit you very well. That'll help you quite a bit. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this tuning discussion that it takes patience. You gotta be patient with yourself. Some of you might think, I don't have a musical ear. Most of us don't have fantastic listening ears at first, but it develops over time. Gotta be patient. Second thing is, as you do this tuning, it really helps if the surrounding area around you is relatively quiet. That means you can't really have the radio or the TV on. You can't have a whole lot of talking because you're going to have to listen so closely to these notes to compare, you know. You're going to get frustrated if you try to tune the guitar like this with the CD player going or other music or lots of loud sounds. So try to be in as quiet a place as possible and be patient with yourself. Here's one more tip. Realistically, if your guitar is out of tune, it's rare that you'll have to tune a turning knob, to turn a tuning knob more than an 1/8 of a turn, a 1/4 turn. A lot of guitars nowadays are built very well, and they don't require tons of retuning. If you find yourself cranking it and the sound isn't right, stop, because you might be doing something wrong. I know for most of us, our mistake is we think we're turning the knob that applies to one string, and we're turning the wrong knob. Okay, so there's a little tip. All right, so we're about to wrap up today's program. I hope you've learned a lot about Guitar Basics 101. Of the other programs in our series here, we'll cover a lot of things that are great for beginners, but also great for more intermediate or advanced players as well. Now, before we run out of time, I'm going to play a little bit for you here. Thanks for watching. Send us an email or give us a call. Here we go.